So I have a bit of a confession to make. Before I became interested in cities, I did work in financial services. Yeah, I was a trader. So why is that important? Well, during my time in that sector, I witnessed an incredible digitization of the industry. When I started, most people didn't even know what an algorithm was. And today, more than 60% of everything that's traded is traded by machines, and trading desks are being replaced by software engineers and coders. So I've seen what I would consider to be the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've seen incredible levels of data maturity in real-time processing, as well as critical failures in modeling and collective imagination. So there's no question that we're now at the zenith of excitement about what big data and digitization will mean for other industries. Its prospects to change our lives, provide us with critical information, and ultimately make our cities better, safer, and greener. Now, you'll have seen diagrams like this maybe 1,000 times before in a multitude of incarnations. You go to any technology company's website, and they'll tell you that your city is going to generate petabytes, if not zettabytes, if not yottabytes of data. And the popular narrative goes that this data is the holy grail for making your city smart. Well, is it? Today, I'm going to focus on the murky black box that goes by the name of big data analytics. In particular, machine learning, deep learning, and neural networks. The popular narrative goes that with growing and diverse data sets and massive computer power, we've never had so much opportunity to train machines to understand the world for us. So this subset of techniques, machine learning and AI, have become synonymous with big data analytics. But I'm going to argue that we're currently putting too much emphasis on this area and ignoring other avenues of research to the detriment of our cities. And it's kind of understandable, right? Machine learning offers the promise of being able to deliver quick questions to complex problems. But we all know the real world, is never that easy. Internally, we call this hitting the big data wall. And here's a cartoon that explains it far more articulately than I can. Our field has been struggling with this problem for years. Well, struggle no more. I'm here to solve it with algorithms. 6 months later, wow, this is a really hard problem. And a lot of clever people have hit this big data wall. Whether it's Google finding out that their predictive analytics can't forecast flu as well as it did on the training set. Whether it's finding out that the system that was designed to answer simple Year 9 maths questions can't, or finding out that your chatbot can't really engage with your social network user, or my favourite, the chatbot that became a racist overnight. Now, none of this is to say there isn't value in these techniques. You know, we're certainly using these techniques in Exeter, and you can visit our stand and you can see the speed model we've used these techniques to help develop. But what I want to describe are some of the pitfalls, drawbacks, and critical limitations that we need to understand when we're designing systems to support infrastructure, policy, planning, and investment. And when I was thinking about how to communicate the limitations of our advances in this field, well, nothing stands out to me more than the assistance systems that are currently being embedded into everything we do. So there's no doubt that these techniques have helped us deliver huge advances in speech recognition, image recognition, and text recognition. But despite all that progress, how many of us actually follow our Netflix and Amazon recommendations? How many of us can honestly say we regularly use Siri? And how many of us have any trust in predictive text? Predictive text is the modern day equivalent of the Microsoft Office paperclip. So this brings me to the first major limitation, and that is that the edge cases, the cases that fall out of the training data, the times when the system gets it wrong, which is actually quite frequently, really matter. They're things we laugh about when applied to social media or virtual assistants, but in the real world, in critical systems, they are absolutely essential. So here's an example from the New York Times. This was reported as a major success. Researchers announced advance in image recognition software. And it's pretty good, right? You can give the computer an image, and it will put a caption on it for you. So here's an example. Human says, a group of men playing frisbee in the park. Computer says, a group of young people playing a game of frisbee. Brilliant. I mean, that's an amazing achievement. Here's another example. Give the computer this image. A person riding a dirt bike is covered in mud. The computer says, a person riding a motorcycle on a dirt road. Brilliant. I mean, that's amazing. That's 2 out of 2. That's 100% success rate. Here's another example. The human says it's clearly a green monster kite soaring in a sunny sky. The computer says a man flying through the air while riding a snowboard. I mean, what's so unnerving about this is how certain the machine appears. I mean, it's so specific and yet it's so wrong. In the real world, that's the difference between recognizing a child in a wheelchair about to cross a road and someone sat on a piece of street furniture. So in a real world context, this is not a success, and it shouldn't be proclaimed as one. The key point here is that these systems are very data hungry, but will only ever be as good as the data that they've been given. So this works well for narrow and constrained tasks. But ultimately, edge cases, the cases that fall outside of the input data, they pose a real risk if these systems are used with abandon across our cities. For critical systems within vehicles, we need a much higher level of rigor, and we're a long way from having that with entry-level or even advanced-level big data techniques. Now, to introduce the second limitation, I'm going to show you some more pictures. Some of these images are going to be of dogs, and some of them are going to be of cakes. And I need you to tell me which one is which. So we're going to start. Hands up who thinks that this is a dog. Good, 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 good. Hands up who thinks that this is a dog. Oh, there's always one. There's always one. They get a little bit harder from now on. Is it a dog or a cake? Shout out. Dog, dog. Is it a tennis court or a cake? No, it's a cake. Yep, and this is the hardest one yet. What I love about this is that your brain instantly recognised it was a dog cake and not a cake dog. Your subconscious overcoming, well, it's actually a very distinct subtlety between those two things. So I know it's not a very scientific example, but I showed this to my daughter. She's 2.5 years old, and she was able to correctly identify all of these different examples and all of these different examples. Now, this is the sort of thing that you could train a machine to do if you wanted to, and you had, a couple of million data points. But I think, then I showed my daughter this, and she knew that this was a dog. And I showed her this, and she knew that this was a dog. Now, these are things that would ordinarily fall outside of a generic training set. And I know it's not scientific, but I know for a fact that my daughter's never seen a dog quite like this. So I would argue that the human brain has abstracted, even at a young age, the meaning of a dog, and created multiple layers about what that dog is. Talking to her, you'll understand that she knows that a dog has eyes and ears and a nose and a tail, and that these things aren't just contours or gradients on an image. So the point is, it's exactly this ability to abstract things that enables us as humans, one, to model, and two, infer things from a small amount of data. So next I showed her the final slide, which is this. And she said, it's a dog. He's under there. He's hiding. She applied a load of context to a very small image. So the point is, the human brain can find, utilize, and link together vastly more complicated and ill-defined data than we can currently achieve with computers. Yes. Computers can help us identify relationships in data. And yes, computers can help us test the strength of the relationships in data. And yes, computers can help us backtest our hypotheses to see how they performed in the past. But the human brain is still the best tool we have to interpret these relationships, to create context and meaning, but ultimately about weighing up judgments about what that might mean for the future. Now, for me, this is what I like to use as an example of small data. Now, data scientists don't like to talk about small data, and it's pretty clear why, because it's very easy to extrapolate erroneously based on only a couple of data sets. However, when we look at many of the decisions we actually have to make, many are based on small amounts of data, limited amounts of information. So I'll give you an example. Imagine you're the manager of a football team, and you've been performing really well all season, but today, for some reason, in this match, you're down 2-0 at half-time. What do? Envisage another scenario. Orders for your main product were up 20% last month, and you couldn't meet them because your factory was already capacity. What do? So I'm going to give you a little bit more of a transport example here. It's a bit more in depth. This is the Stats 19 motorcycle injury data for Great Britain. Many of you will be familiar with this. And we can use statistical or visualization techniques to look through this data. We looked at it in various ways, but I'm going to show you one particular visualization. This is a Lexis diagram. So along the x-axis you have the year of the accident, and on the y-axis you have the age of the people who were involved in that accident, normalised for population. So it's essentially a heat map. Where you see the areas of darker red, there are more accidents, and where it's lighter red, there are fewer. So the first feature, just looking along the bottom, you can see that it's a darker red. So that tells us that young people have more accidents. It's something we intuitively know, and they get higher insurance premiums because of that very fact. The feature you might not have noticed without looking at the data in this way is this band of darker red that goes up diagonally. Now, what's this trying to say? This is implying that those people who were aged between 15 and 28 in 1990 had elevated accident rates then, but those accident rates persisted for the whole of their lives. Now, this has a statistical name. We call it a cohort effect. It's a well-established phenomenon in medical circles. So the basic idea is that whilst everyone's different, the context and shared experiences of a generation or cohort can have a long-lasting impact on how they behave. And as humans, we can interpret the trend. So in our office, we call them the easy rider generation. They were those individuals who started motorcycling before compulsory basic training was introduced in 1990. But look here. We have another area that's becoming darker. And my question to you is this a new cohort effect? Because if it is, these people could also have elevated accident rates through their lives. This trend could potentially influence overall accident rates, for the whole of the UK. Answering this question and making a decision could have a material impact, save money and lives. But what on earth should we do? So the model will require 10 more years of data before it will confirm that there's a cohort effect. And we don't have that data today. So that's going to take too long. We can't realistically evaluate a probability from that data set, and we can't find any more data because we already have all of the data that's actually comparable. Policymakers, local authorities, and city leaders have to make decisions all the time based on data sets just like this. Small data points that could have big implications. And the point is, it doesn't matter how much big data you've got, it will never remove the uncertainty. But I'd actually go a step further. I'm going to show you two examples where an over-reliance on the historic data without a process to capture the changes in the model has led people to be caught out. So the first is the Google flu example that I showed before. The key issue here was that patterns observed in data taken at one time didn't necessarily apply to data collected at another time. This is an example from The Economist in 2013. So it's looking at the performance of quantitative funds. So quant investment funds, they use algorithms and backtesting techniques to follow market trends. They worked really well up until 2008, and then they stopped. And we all know financial services is an area where we can find lots of examples about how an over-reliance on data has been catastrophic. So where does this leave us? Yeah, it may seem strange to have a technology company talking so much about the limitations of tools and techniques that even we ourselves use. But it's important to understand, the role of technology is to extend our capabilities. The role of technology should be to help us make better decisions. So I absolutely believe that we can use data to help radically improve congestion. But I don't think we're going to get there if the techniques we're using are black boxes. We're not going to get buy-in, and we're not going to get deployment. All of the data in the world won't help our cities if we're not using it in more open and transparent ways. So you'll notice many references to visions of the future involving data that don't include humans. And I guess the biggest danger with the current hype about AI, machine learning, is that we're close to being able to take humans out of the equation. Well, this is misguided, if not dangerous. The truth is that humans are absolutely essential to every stage of a smart city or a smart anything. Let's just take a look at all the things that humans do. Setting the vision. This is possibly the most important step that so often gets overlooked when we're only focused on technology. What is it that we actually want to achieve? Then we need to ask the right questions. This involves a deep sectoral knowledge, the humility to acknowledge where there are unanswered questions, and an ability to prioritise how robust answers to those questions will lead to better outcomes. Only with those two things in hand can we actually begin designing an information process to support the objectives. And this is where data cleaning, cataloging, processing, validating, that comes in. And in transport, that's currently 80 to 90% of the work. Find me a machine that can do all of that work for us. From there on, it's about identifying the right analysis for the job, but ultimately about supporting better decisions and providing monitoring to make sure that the expected benefits are actually converted into real-world outcomes. So I'm going to briefly describe how we're doing this in Exeter, one of our first partner cities. In Exeter, the vision is clear: energy independent and congestion-free by 2025. Yeah, you heard me, congestion-free by 2025. Everything we do with data and technology in Exeter is aimed at supporting that vision. And why is that interesting? Well, according to INRIX, Exeter has the slowest peak hour congestion in the UK. Exeter is also the fastest growing city in the UK. Exeter has the second largest travel to work area in the UK, and it sits within Devon, which has more highway kilometres than any other council in the UK. So it's a region that relies heavily on cars. So despite all of those challenges, we're working with Exeter to architect a vision towards a route to zero carbon, zero congestion. To overcome these challenges, we have to ask the right questions. So we're doing this continuously. And what's great is that when you help people answer the questions they already have, you encourage them to ask even better and bolder questions. Answering these questions requires a multitude of skills. This is not analytics you can put into a black box to get an answer. It's about finding the right tools and the right data to answer the most difficult questions we have in our understanding of congestion. For example, we're looking at demand and latent demand, modal choice and the behavioural tipping points that actually influence people in making those decisions, asset utilisation, stochastic optimisation, route choice. And in all of this, we have to integrate the transportation work with the other key initiatives such as health and energy. And if you're interested, I'd also thoroughly recommend reading our energy study for Greater Exeter, which you can find on our website. All of this knowledge and understanding needs to be tied together with rapid and exhaustive option generation, essentially the decision-making tools to convert this understanding into action. So we've got a number of projects we're working on to completely understand these issues. But to fully solve these problems, in some cases we need different data. Not bigger data, but high-quality, targeted data. We're willing to invest or co-invest with potential partners to unlock that data. So really, we're looking to work with partners who understand the challenges and limitations I've outlined, but who share our deep desire to make data work to solve the real-world transportation problems. Myself and Stephen, my colleague, will be here after Q&A. So if you or your colleagues are interested in working with us, please come and have a chat, or just leave a business card. Thank you very much.